Live. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all ships at sea. Welcome back to another edition of the Ghost Show podcast. The
Oh no.
thing, Ghost Show Press. And thank you very much for joining us live. And let's see here. I haven't done this in a while. Let's see how much. Oh, hey, here you go. I still have the theme song here. So here we go. Just to keep the tradition alive. The you feel free to stand if you wish. Put your hand over your heart, whatever you want to do. But here you go. The official Ghost Show podcast. That's what happens when you call up your business partner and say, "Get me the least appropriate music you can tolerate." All righty. Well, thank you. All right. Well, thank you all again for joining us. First of all, apologies if we have some technical issues tonight right here on the East Coast. We are having a storm of biblical proportions, so this may seem like one of those broadcasts from a zombie movie, where they, where they tell you the government has collapsed and go run to the shelters. Any man left on the Rio Grande is king of the world, as far as I know. That kind of thing. So again, apologies for any technical issues you might have. But as we work through this end of the world quality broadcast, let me bring on one at a time here the wonderful contributors to the Everyone's Gone to the Movie series who have joined us tonight. Going in cube order here, let me first of all bring on Jason Walters. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Jason Walters, occasional author and general manager of the indie role-playing game book distributor Indie Press Revolution. All
right, and Rob, introduce yourself.
Hey there, I am Rob Toth. I am a journalist, and I sometimes do kooky stuff like these books.
John!
Hey, current collaborator with Professor McLaughlin on several projects. Occasional author sounds about right. Thank you for coining that term. I lead an otherwise rather mundane existence currently in Western Pennsylvania. I've also done some collaboration with Alex there. He did some editorial work on a recent release.
I did.
And Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am the author of the Titan City Chronicles, the executive producer of the Untold Stories Project, a Twitch streaming channel dedicated to actual plays for role-playing games, and the assistant line developer for Mutants and Masterminds over at Great Ordeal Publishing.
And lastly, and surely leastly, I'm Professor Christopher McLaughlin. I'm the creative pit boss of Ghost Show Press. I am the man who is singularly blessed to have such talented friends as these, and they indulge me on things like podcasts and, yes, books. And that is the reason we are all here tonight, because if you haven't heard, the gang of lovable misfits who put together Transgressive Horror, our successful Kickstarter from a year ago, which was optimistically labeled Volume 1 in the Everyone's Gone to the Movie series. Well, we're back with Volume 2, my friends. Friday, after I get home from work, as I stagger home, I'm going to hit the Go Live button, and you'll be able to chip in and help hopefully make a second book happen. If you missed the first book, we have some great opportunities for you to help out this project and get caught up on the other. We also have some special opportunities to do some fun stuff, like you can commission your own essay for the book, and you can also join us here as a guest on one of the Banff family of podcasts. So hopefully we'll get you here on the Ghost Show. You might get bounced to the Star Trek podcast, which would be kind of weird, but who knows? We're unpredictable here. But yes, but if you back us at that level, we will podcast you and let you talk about your movies. And speaking of talking about movies, that's what these four lovely gentlemen are here to do. I thought I would give them an opportunity to talk about what they're going to be talking about in our book and why, and give you a little flavor of where we're going with this. And Jason, would you mind going first?
No, I don't mind. I chose for this collection to write an essay on Seth Eckerman's Blood Machines, which is what is it? It's a short movie that was released on Shudder. That was made in a warehouse in Paris, and is soundtracked by a group of people who call themselves Carpenter Brute. Seth Eckerman itself is actually 2 or 3 people, not really a single person. And it was crowdfunded entirely and made on a budget of about $125,000. And I found the previews on YouTube so fascinating that I bought a subscription to Shudder and watched it 4 or 5 times. It is an amazing blend of 2001: A Space Odyssey, Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, and a bad DMT trip. It's very difficult to say what the movie means, but I think on its minuscule budget, it compares very favorably with a large number of films that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make, in that it was interesting and visually very beautiful. It's kind of hard to describe what it's like, but it has a very 70s psychedelic vibe to it, even though it's a kind of a space opera. It is very morally ambiguous. I think it's probably a feminist statement, but maybe not. I'll let you watch it and decide for yourselves. And it's not stale. Stylistically, they chose to film it and sort of age the film to make it look like you're watching a film you found on VHS tape somewhere in a garage sale. So even though it was obviously filmed digitally, they kind of did a filter overlay. I don't know what the proper film term is. Someone can step in if they like, to make it look like an 80s film you'd be watching now, in about the shape you'd think a low budget 80s film would be in, film quality wise, but it's also visually beautiful. Yeah, like a VHS tape. But it's also visually very startling. Its spaceships are menacing and alive and involve a lot of bleeding and goop. It does one of these strange flips. Not quite as extreme as, say, Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects, but it doesn't flip like that, where the kind of Captain Kirk character that you start off sympathizing with very quickly becomes kind of unsympathetic and sexually transgressive, and you're not rooting for him anymore. And on the whole, highly recommended. Again, made by some underground filmmakers in a warehouse in Paris for 0.0001% of the volume of, I don't know, like any of the final 3 Star Wars trilogy films, and held my interest much more thoroughly. So that was my pick.
You know, I have to say that one of the purposes of me putting together this series is I wanted to help people find strange and offbeat and remarkable films in this world of limitless streaming and discs and things like that. And when you turned in that essay, and it was a film that I had to go find and look up myself, and for me to experience it because of your manuscript, that was great. That was such fun.
Did you like it?
Well, in a way, it's sort of
interesting, right, Professor?
I don't want to denigrate anybody else or any other title, but you know, watching it and just getting that overwhelming sense that I have never seen anything else like this in my life, and probably won't ever see anything else like this in my life. It just seemed to embody the mission statement of this series, maybe more than any. It was like watching it and feeling the zeitgeist of what I'm trying to do with this series more than anything else.
Professor, I have one question.
Right ahead, please.
Does it stand up to Santo versus Dracula?
I'm glad you asked. having written a book somewhat on this topic, I would say no, because what can?
I saw a late night documentary on the Mexican luchador culture and how it bled into movies and comics in the from like sort of the mid 50s through the 70s.
Yeah.
And they had Santo, they had clips of Santo because he had passed by then. They did have his son, and they had Blue Demon and Mills Mascaras, and these guys stayed in character. They were not breaking kayfabe. They were acting as if these events had actually happened.
Blue Demon died sitting on a park bench as a very old man with his mask on, waiting for a bus. Now that's authenticity.
Yes. And answer to your original question, I was going to say, not better than the clean version of Santo and Dracula, but not up there with the gratuitously nudie version of it. My standard answer. Okay. All right. Well, before we move on, my friend Justin Moreb, who's also a contributor to this book, is trying to get into the studio, and if these post-apocalyptic conditions will allow him, I would love to have him in here. He says he's got signal issues, so Justin, we hope you can be with us. If not, we'll definitely get you on a future show. But all right, but while we are waiting for the zombies to come and take us, Rob, would you be willing to talk about your extraordinary piece of work on one of my favorite films?
Well, the movie I chose was Rollerball, with James Caan and a cast of thousands, and the plot is not too hard to describe. It's about a sport in the future that's a combination of the roller derby and a blood sport. And I chose it because, for one thing, it was very familiar to me. Way back in the 80s, they would have films on in the afternoons, on the weekends, on broadcast TV, which is that thing over the air, and they would show this film up, maybe 3 times a month. I can't even tell, but it struck me as just one of the most well acted, well put together films of the 70s in that genre, and in many ways, I think it's the most 70s of the 70s sci-fi films. It takes to heart so much of the style and so much of the other stuff that was in the air with movies at the time, and it really puts them to great effect. And it comes across with a kind of a grittiness and a realism, that is not there in like Omega Man, which I love, and actually was my original choice to write about until I spoke to the professor. The point of the essay is kind of about how it was the first sci-fi film about sports, about a plausible sport, and how it reflects all the stuff that was going on in the sports world at the time, and kind of in the changing of of the American approach to celebrity, to big money in sports, to to the revolutions in how we saw sports stars themselves at the time. How they were more personalized, how we got to see an inside view of them in the locker rooms, in their memoirs, and just it's just a great film in and of itself, and it's incredibly well shot, incredibly fast paced. The film is kind of split into periods, like the periods of a game, and each of the periods has at its core one contest, and around that are sort of the slow spots that are the the repercussions of the game that we just saw. And it really is very, it's just an experience, and I think it still holds true after, God, almost 40 years now. I think it's still such a strong film, and it's it's unique, essentially. The tone and the acting and just the themes and the story itself. There isn't anything quite like it, and I think that's what makes it so compelling for me. It's just so good and so unique, and yeah, mm, just a great movie.
And as on a personal level, the scene where James Caan goes looking for an actual history archive, so Ralph Richardson tells him that their imperfect storage system, like, we've lost the entire 14th century, but it's no great deal, just a bunch of naughty popes. and now if we're having a department meeting or something and something else has been cut from the curriculum, I just speak up and go, we didn't lose much there, just a bunch of naughty popes.
The computer in that scene is incredible. It's essentially like an aquarium behind oh God, like a room divider, and you see and the bubbles are going up, and the computer operator is saying, "Hey, what are you doing? Why don't you naughty thing, why don't you tell us? That's not the question the man asked. We need an answer for this."
If you haven't seen the current iteration of Mystery Science Theater 3000, there's a running gag that the mad scientists are now storing all the shows on liquid technology, and it's terrible, but they refuse to acknowledge it, and they'll throw in little bits like "Flush them the movie." So it always takes me back to Rollerball in that way. Alrighty.
Rollerball has James Caan in his absolute prime, and it's clear he wasn't. It was the furthest thing from phoning the role in. I mean, that alone makes Rollerball a classic, frankly.
Yeah, definitely. Well, John, please tell us about what you're doing for Subversive Sci-Fi.
Yeah, and you actually should receive my first draft last night.
I did. I saw. I finally checked my email at 5 a.m. and that sent me off to bed with a smile, knowing I had something good to look forward to read tonight.
Well, I hope so. I hope it's going to live up to expectations. So I struggled a bit, which I acknowledged in my essay, in the first time around the Transgressive Horror volume. It came pretty immediately to mind that I was going to do the original Godzilla, which of course is an incredibly well-known film, but had almost never been treated as horror. And I think I made some fairly cogent arguments that it absolutely was, and was in fact transgressive horror at that. When I wrote, I can't believe it's been a year ago. But I struggled, even though I'm much more of a science fiction than a horror fan, I struggled to find a film that, wasn't utterly obscure, because I wanted it to be, fairly readily accessible to people who wanted to go and check out the movie I was talking about, but at the same time, wasn't terribly well known either, where it was, a little bit of, clear blue sky, to use a business term. It just hadn't been, done to death. So what I happened upon when I was suffering a little mild insomnia one night was Fantastic Planet. I don't know if any of you are familiar. It looks like at least one of you is familiar. And Fantastic Planet was a 1973 French-Czech animated film, which concerns the plight of humans, called ohms in the film, on the alien world of the Drogs. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. For some reason, it was transliterated into English in subtitles sometimes as Trogs instead. But the Drogs are a highly advanced, technologically advanced race who are colossal in stature. Humans are comparatively tiny creatures on their world. They are apparently very egalitarian. You see no evidence of violence among themselves, no racism, no warfare, no ecological problems. And the humans are treated as pets, essentially, if domesticated. If those who have escaped to the wild, to spaces abandoned by the race that's lording it over this planet, are considered feral. Their sapience is not really acknowledged, and periodically they are culled because they're considered a nuisance. They're considered vermin out in the wild. And it involves the plight of one particular ohm named Ter, who is accidentally inundated with the knowledge of his household that he's dwelling in, and then escapes to the wild, no longer wishes to be a pet, and then encounters a tribe of humans. And this initially seems like, a rather straightforward message film. I'll get both message film, so I can do the air quote properly, of the counterculture era, which was waning in the early 70s, but still very much a force, involving civil rights, and anti-colonialism, and animal rights within that, those analogies. But if you look just a little bit closer, the perspective is not the counterculture perspective. And I delve very much into that in my essay. And I make the case as to why Fantastic Planet is very distinct from films such as Yellow Submarine or some of Ralph Bakshi's work. It's distinct not only in the perspective, but it's also very distinct in the visuals. As I mentioned in my text, there's a possibly apocryphal statement attributed to Roger Ebert that the film's sights and sounds would make a whole lot more sense if one was, tripping on psychedelics, but he wouldn't want that experience. I don't know if I agree with him. I discuss why, the film already has elements of not being a head trip, but a really bad trip. Not bad in the sense of quality. It's of outstanding quality. But the images are just really grotesque and disturbing, not in the sense of gore or any sort of obscene imagery, but this is an alien world, and it's in fact I think the actual translation of the Czech title is The Savage Planet. And even though the Drogs don't lead to savage existence, they're the kind of images that H.P. Lovecraft might dream up. I mean, no tentacles involved, but this is just an utterly bizarre land filled with indescribable flora and fauna, and even the ground itself, which sort of heaves and breathes at times. It's not, the drags aren't just giant humans with blue skin and odd markings on their faces. They are an alien race. So I talk about all of that when I discuss Fantastic Planet.
Yes, I have to admit, when you first pitched that to me as your topic, it took me back in the most wonderful way to one of the real touchstone inspirations for what I want to do with Ghost Show, and that is the legendary basic cable USA Network show Night Flight, which, for those of us of a certain age, may remember that we spent our 80s from 11 p.m. until 6 in the morning watching this show, this 7-hour marathon of decidedly offbeat, off-kilter, weird stuff we would otherwise miss. And that was my first exposure to everything from Devo to Sun Ra to Web Wilder to Fantastic Planet. And you doing that, it was such a marvelous rejoining of where this idea started 40 years ago and where we are now. So that was I just thought perfect choice for this.
Did you get to read it yet? Did you get to read my draft?
I checked my email at 5 a.m. right before I went to bed, and I wasn't about to subject you to my 5 a.m. comments, which are just not fit for human consumption. But my plan is to try to get caught up on them. If not tonight, then tomorrow, because I'm on my week where I have to show up for work, even though I have no students. So I'm thinking maybe some good reading time there. Although, ideally, I'd love it if I could sneak it into graduation, because I could really get some work done. But yes, but soon you'll have comments, and they'll be coherent and everything.
Well, I'm sorry it came so late. Actually, it's just I had to make a rather unexpected move, and so it's just involved a lot of work, quite frankly.
You're beautiful. You're fine. It's totally good. It's totally good.
Could I ask John a question?
Please.
John, I actually had the privilege of seeing Fantastic Planet in a theater at one point, which was a lovely experience. It's a visually beautiful and unique, piece of art. Do you think, though, that it's part of a genre, kind of from the 70s, or is it just a completely like maybe with Isaac Asimov's Life Force and a handful of other things, or
no?
Or do you think it just stands completely alone?
I think it stands alone. I mean, I don't it. To the extent that anything stands alone, I mean, do I think that it would have existed if you hadn't had some preceding, what were loosely termed adult animation, animated films? Well, no. I mean, something has to come before to break that ground. But I don't think it's related to anything before or since. Not visually. Not in terms, frankly, of where the story goes. Not in terms of its tone. It's it has decided. It definitely does not have. It definitely doesn't have a. It seems to have more of a Eastern European tone than a Western tone. Even though it's a collaboration with French studios and French filmmakers as well. It's I haven't others have looked at the film before me and said the same thing. They just think it's just unrelated to most of what came before or after in terms of animated science fiction or science fantasy.
It is of a general.
It does seem a lot more.
Sorry. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. It does seem a lot more like something like Solaris than it does something like the movie Heavy Metal. Now that you.
Well, yeah. I mean, Solaris was by Stanislaw Lem, whom again was he also Czech? or is
He was Polish.
Polish.
Yeah.
Polish science fiction author. I actually was introduced to him way back when, in junior high school. I think the first thing I read by him was the Siberiad, which, I hadn't read anything like that before. And his work, every one of his works was unlike the other. I mean, it wasn't like Asimov or Heinlein, who you picked up on the common themes, the common tones, the common archetypes of their protagonists. But like the Siberiad is nothing like Solaris, is nothing like memoirs found in the bathtub. So yeah, if it's similar in some way to Solaris in terms of what it brings, that puts it in rarefied company, at least in my opinion.
I also feel like it's part of a general type of 70s animation where there was that brief window where, all this talk we hear about how animation is the imagination with no limits, but it's truly that, and it isn't that filtered through like Filmation and Hanna-Barbera. So it feels like it is of a piece with Wizards and Fritz the Cat and things like that.
I kind of argue again. I think I argue that it stands apart from that. And Yellow Submarine.
Just in the sense that you're seeing the medium being used to its fullest.
Oh, sure. That it's not fairy tales. It's not fables.
Yes. Yeah. All right. And Alex, please. The floor is yours, sir. Please tell us about what you're doing.
Well, I'm going to take us all back to the Hallison days of 2009, which is somehow 13 years ago, to talk about a British film called The Triangle, or just Triangle. I don't think there's a the. Triangle is the first thing about Triangle that made me want to pick it for the professor is that it takes place on a yacht.
Guilty.
Yeah. But it's kind of hard to explain. It's a movie that takes place within a time loop. And the loop that is in place is sort of like a modern retelling of the myth of Sisyphus, involving a lot of scary things on a capsized yacht and on a ghost ocean liner adrift somewhere in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. Originally, I was going to do my essay on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but I was looking through that and I was like, I don't really have anything to offer that hasn't been written in 1,000 other op-eds about this particular piece. So my wife and I, we have this tradition where almost every night before bed, we'll sit down and we'll watch just some horror movie that we find on Amazon Prime or Hulu or Shudder or anywhere like that. And this came up and it really captured my imagination when we were watching it a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, okay, this is interesting because it has this sort of mythic storytelling about it. And they are brave enough not to explain how anything works, which I think a lot of science fiction movies get into the habit of, I want to explain everything about the world building here. And if you're clever enough to pay attention while the movie's going on, you have the ability to see how the loop is progressing and watch the protagonist try to fight a bunch of different ways to get out of the loop. But she keeps running into evidence that she has tried all of these different ways to get out of the loop in the past. And in the end, it winds up, she pushes the boulder to the top of the hill and rolls all the way back down to the bottom. And she willingly subjects herself to the loop again and again and again and again. The professor hasn't seen my essay yet, but I'm really excited for you to check it out.
I'm really excited about seeing it because that film sounds like the last year of my life, pretty much. Right?
Yeah, there is a lot of I know it was written 13 years ago, but there's a lot of like COVID circles going on and that sort of isolation and getting shoved back into the same routine.
I feel personally horrified by that relatable content. All righty.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, please.
Do you mind? I happen to really enjoy that film, and I kind of see it as a piece of a new generation of horror that is, where the budgets are really tight, essentially made for streaming. And there's a lot of garbage in there, but real gems too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you've seen the same thing with Sci-Fi, because all of the films in my experience, like The Triangle, are horror in some way.
Yeah.
And as I said, there's a ton of those out there, but it's tough to find stuff with Sci-Fi where the budget is low, the restrictions are high. There's stuff like Primer, but do you see anything like more in the mainstream indie scene for Sci-Fi?
I haven't seen anything that's like strictly sci-fi. I see a lot of sci-fi horror movies that are sort of in that vein. I feel like, I don't know, science fiction, like just pure science fiction, almost feels snobbish now. I think in terms of budget and in terms of a story that is strictly science fiction on the basis of seeing the world or seeing these interesting new vistas. I can't think of anything recently in the indie sphere that's just been pure sci-fi by itself.
I think with horror, there's a subgenre of psychological horror. There's the genre of just because I'm thinking of these now because I recently I've been reading the new edition of Ravenloft, and there's psychological horror, there's folk horror, there are ghost stories, and you can do those with a micro budget. I think science fiction is a little harder to do with that. Sure. I mean, I could see like a pure time travel story with a pretty limited budget. You have to set in the modern day basically, but you could do some like fun time loopy things that didn't touch on horror necessarily.
Happy Death Day feels like it is in there, but that's also a horror movie,
right?
But I mean, it's great.
Yeah, if you did something like Happy Death Day, but you made it more of a search for a particular MacGuffin rather than having to elude a serial killer, then you'd have a science fiction. You could have a pretty economically done science fiction film. But then we tend to extend science fiction with aliens, other worlds, space travel, gadgets that do amazing things. So that's a little hard to pull off without a special effects budget.
Do you know the title of the film? It's there are actually two films. There was an original, and then there's one that is essentially a remake of it. The newer one is about these two guys who were in a cult, and essentially they get.
I know of it. I know what you're speaking of.
Yeah.
Yes, they're in a doomsday cult.
Yeah.
And the members they escape and they go back for some reason they're drawn back.
Yeah.
And it is there is a time loop involved.
Yeah.
Where these I've read of it, and it's one of like 3 films in a particular arc, and I guess it was remade. When the director has got some buzz and had a somewhat bigger budget, somewhat more resources, and there is the cult really is worshiping an actual existing entity, some higher order entity. Although even there, I would say they did. From what I've read, it's got horror elements in it.
Yeah.
I feel like Black Mirror is probably the closest thing to what we're looking for, like episodes of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
Again, not to shill for my own essay, but Blood Machines is nothing but outer space science fiction with special effects, and they made it off nothing. It's quite visually impressive. If you haven't seen it,
awesome.
you should see it.
There's actually. I'm sorry, please.
No, I was reminded of my favorite low budget sci-fi crack. My good friend Hal Mangold, who supplied the fabulous cover for both volumes that everyone's gone to the movies. We were discussing our love for the notoriously good, notoriously cheap late '70s British sci-fi classic series Blake Seven. And Hal explained it to someone who was listening on our conversation that Blake Seven was made with all the leftover money from Tom Baker era Doctor Who, which I thought was perfect.
Actually, wasn't that Marvel's Inhumans? I think that was made with the leftover money
from Tom Baker.
I cannot think on a series that blew all its money on the CGI Bulldog.
so now correct me, Professor, if I'm wrong, but they actually made a really outstanding series of clips of their spaceship, the Liberator, and then ran out of money for special effects. Right? It's really true. I mean, I'm not actually making a joke.
I would totally believe that. I would totally believe that.
I have it here in my library behind me. There's a pretty good unofficial guide to Blake Seven you can pick up.
Oh, wow.
I've read a couple of them, yeah.
We're in the same place at the same time. Yeah, that was a great science fiction series and a strange one made with no money at all. Just a lot of running around English cliff sides, if I remember correctly.
I have more money on my shelves back here than they made that show with.
Expanding the Doctor Who reference, at one time, the Daleks were supposed to briefly show up in Blake 7. There was supposed to be a fleet of aliens that they almost encounter. The said aliens having left in the wake of just committing all sorts of depredations on a particular world, and it was going to be fleetingly revealed they were the Daleks, and they were just going to be a case of villains of another series. It wasn't meant to be anything more than that. I have heard Blake 7 universe that Blake 7 is never going to encounter them because they don't even have the budget to do these. These, paper machine constructs that you have to pull with a cable off screen. Which is why they can't go upstairs. I mean,
I had heard that Terry Nation, who owns the copyright, who owns the producing rights on both those, was finding a way to combine them for the good of his bank account. But apparently the closest they ever got was apparently Blake Seven's star Gareth Thomas and Tom Baker were good friends. Both of them were lobbying for a scene on either one of their shows where they would be walking down the same corridor from opposite directions and just pass each other and they go, "Doctor, Blake." And that would be the end of it. No further reference to it on either show, which I think would have been by far the best.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
Well,
can you imagine actually having to pitch that show to a studio executive? When you think about it, where you're like, "Hey, we're gonna have this show. It's gonna be called Blake 7, but we're gonna actually kill Blake in the first season, and he won't show up again. But don't worry about that because part of the plot is he's an accused pedophile." But he's not really one because he's a lawyer. And man, can you imagine pitching that?
If I'm recalling Nation's story correctly, Blake 7 was something he pitched on the fly after his first pitch was shot down.
I wonder what the first pitch was.
I believe it.
It made me have flashbacks, and I think at least half the people on this podcast appreciate it. It reminded me of the good old days of pitching the one and only legendary John Lighthouser, because during the 5 years we worked together, I don't think he ever took a first pitch from me. We put out so many good books together, but it was always the second thing I would pitch him right there on the spot. So I don't know. Maybe that was our chemistry, or just it was easier for me to just wing it than actually write something up. I don't know.
Strangely, John usually liked my first pitches. The only one he was really skeptical about were the characters I did that were the best received, which were the Candy Crew, which were my version of the Royal Flush Gang / the Serpent Squad. But I wanted to be just as off the wall as possible, so they were Candyland themed.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, we're down to the last 15 minutes, and if you don't mind, I just wanted to take a minute and say a word about my film, because with so many of you thinking of our audience and not going for something really obscure, I went the opposite direction. All right, yeah, I went for something that I'm actually going to hold up a copy of it to prove that it exists, because I think that the world needs to know more about British filmmaker Peter Watkins and his incredible body of films. He did most of his work from the late 60s into the early 70s, and every single one of his films is like watching a newscast. Everything that his films foretold has come to pass, much to his horror. And it's and the wonderful thing I appreciate not only is his quality as a filmmaker, his abilities as a prophet. He is one of those rare political animals who has managed to offend people completely across the political perspective, because his one allegiance is to human freedom, and his ability to stand up to right-wing regimes and left-wing regimes when he feels like they are infringing on the rights of the people. I think he is a dying type of man for that. And Punishment Park to me was a natural, because to me it was one of the first examples of how you can do sci-fi not playing off of physics or biology, but off of political science. And him saying in 1971 that our notions about our government and our politics would be completely based off of what we see off of video mediums, regardless of whether or not they were true or not. That to me was fresh. And the film is framed as a mockumentary. This portrait of a repressive early 70s American repressive regime is framed as a West German TV documentary. And it's so many elements coming together. There's nothing quite like it even in Watkins' catalog. And if I can get more people to watch it, I will feel like I made the right choice. And I really shouldn't have gone off and become a bouncer at some seedy Missouri bar. But that's what I'm doing.
Well, what's the plot? I mean, who's the hero? Well,
that's just it. There are protagonists, but it's a shifting narrative between the ostensible young rebels against this authoritarian government who wind up not to be as sympathetic as you think they are, and the representatives of this repressive U.S. regime, which are not as unsympathetic as you think you are, as you initially find them to be. In fact, there's a scene where these rebellious youth are being put on charge for speaking out against their bosses, a situation that I completely don't identify with at all. And about 2 minutes in, you realize that nobody is actually speaking to each other. They're repeating things that they have been given from other sources that they don't totally understand. And it reminds me of how much social media politics is people memeing stuff back at each other. And it's almost like seeing what the 1971 version of a meme war is. So yeah, So yes. So I'm still in the midst of my first draft in between end of school stuff. But I honestly, in addition to just being done with this deathless school year, I'm just looking forward to be able to get back to it and crank out another draft or two.
It sounds cool.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm not paying myself, so I'm going to try to give the audience their money's worth here.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question about
I really want to see all the films that you all have chosen. I have seen Rollerball, but have not seen the others. Now I'm very much interested in seeing all three.
Wonderful.
Do you know what you need, Professor?
What's
an
that?
affiliate link for all the movies.
Oh yeah, that's what you need.
Affiliate link, like get in bed with Jeff Bezos and Amazon.
Yeah, why not? It's a big bed.
Yeah, it's roomy.
It's cozy.
He's gonna kill us all anyway. So we can
Alrighty.
some good use out of it.
And joining us from the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, it's the godfather of the Banff family of podcasts, the one and only Mike Lafferty. Hi, Mike. Thanks for the last
Thanks.
in.
So I forgive me for being so late. Had a family thing that cropped up unexpectedly, and I don't like the term Godfather. I prefer Czar. But thanks, I appreciate it. Oh, this is quite a turnout, our guys. Thanks for everybody for coming out. Are we still live?
We are still live. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Hey, awesome, cool. I think I've met everybody before, except for Jason. I don't think we've been on a podcast before. Everyone else looks familiar, though.
No, I don't think we have. But hey, Mike, we've spoken by email many times.
We have. Nice to.
Oh,
And he's got-
Oh,
there we go.
oh, there he is.
It's
Okay.
it's multiversal interference. But hey,
The hailing frequencies are down.
Say, I have a question for Mike.
yes, sir.
Mike, are the Banff Seas still happening?
We're coming back. Would you like to be a judge? Because
Okay.
we are
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're basically just looking for people who want to spotlight a supers adjacent RPG product from the last, from the plague years, because we did do it for the last 2 years. And,
I would be happy to contribute. I've even published some, so
Okay.
I'm happy to send some in. Happy to help.
all right, cool. That would be great. I think we're gonna not do the great big fan vote this year, maybe next year. But yeah, I've got a couple of judges, and Alex, if you want to come back and do it again, would love to have you, sir.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. I'd be happy.
All right, cool. I will send you an email.
Thank you.
So what have I missed, Chris?
You missed me sweating several buckets when I was still sitting here by myself 5 minutes before airtime. But you saw the wonderful, joyous relief when these wonderful gentlemen showed up at the nick of time. We've been discussing our essays and why we picked the movies we picked, and exchanging some banter about wonderfully cheap jack British productions, and just talking a little bit about the Kickstarter. And I dropped the link into the chat if any of y'all are wondering where to go to sign up to be notified when we go live on Friday. The link is in the comments there. So I know you're not supposed to go to the comments, but for this one time, go to the comments. It will actually not horrify you. And we're going to be we've been at this about an hour, so I was going to go around for closing remarks and final plugs and comments and call it a night.
Sweet, sounds good.
All right, okay. Well, gentlemen, any closing thoughts or comments or questions before we call it a night?
I have a closing question.
I want to thank.
I don't remember from the. I don't remember from the emails, but did anybody have any of the Russian films to work on?
We didn't get any purely Russian films, but Alex Bledsoe did a fabulous essay on a film whose name I cannot pronounce because I am from rural Virginia. I will give it a shot, and then you all can mock it incessantly from here on out. But Alex did a fabulous essay on okay, let me make sure I get this straight. East German Hungarian film. I think I'm getting the origin. Eolemea. EOLOMEA from 1972, which I will freely admit I had not heard of, and it's another film that I had to track down because of Alex's essay, and I'm so glad I did. It really is an amazing film on its own terms, and it manages not to be punishingly slow or horrifically look at those stupid capitalists propaganda East German sci-fi. It stands out as it stands out in a lot of ways, and it's another thing I'm super looking forward to publishing.
I just want to thank you, Professor, for inviting me back. Always pleased when someone likes what I've done. Honestly, in the last year and a half, because of various circumstances unforeseen, have not gotten to do a lot creatively, and forgive any facial contortions or stuffiness that I may have displayed tonight, because the pollen count in Western PA where I live is like off the charts right now. I'm not even especially allergic, but everyone is struggling because when it feels like you're breathing and seeing through sand, even indoors, that can be a bit of a problem. Very good to. I don't think I'd met or interacted with Jason or Rob before. So great to meet you both, gentlemen. Look forward to reading your essays. Alex came back for this one. Very much like Tucker and your treatise on Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
More people should watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil. That's the moral of my life.
And
all of rural Virginia thanks you for that essay. Since I am their ambassador to the civilized world. Okay. All right, and Alex, while we're plugging stuff, I just saw the happy news that you are putting the Commissioner Gordon coat back on again.
I am. I'm playing Commissioner Gordon in a Batman fan film, a trilogy of Batman fan films, as a matter of fact. It will be available on TJ Montgomery's YouTube channel, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So go over there and give them a like if you haven't yet. I know there's a trailer coming out soon. So,
Alex, if you're going to be Commissioner Gordon, you got to decide once and for all whether Barbara is your niece or your daughter. Like much else, DC just can't seem to keep that one straight.
Right. Well, here's the funny thing. She is my daughter in the movie, but the actress is like a year younger than me.
He's a time loop.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes. All right. Well, Rob, do you anything you want to say before we say goodnight?
Oh boy, I appreciate the opportunity to do the essay, to work on the previous book too, and to be here with these terrific guys. You know, I've been sci-fi fan, a horror fan my entire life, and I think that the folks you picked, the folks who volunteered, came up with a lot of amazing films and a lot of amazing ideas, and introduced me to a lot of stuff that I never would have seen or heard of, and I just appreciate it. I think that the books are fantastic, and you know, I look forward to the musicals one.
You know,
is that real? Are we doing a musicals one? Because
yeah.
I have been very, very gratified by the number of people that are already asking me about Volume 3, and I thought, what a wonderful problem to have, that you know we would have to come up with an idea for Volume 3. That would be marvelous. All right, Mike, do you have anything cool coming up on the Banff family of podcasts this week you want to talk about?
I do have some thoughts about Greece, and I would love to submit that essay for Volume 3. We are doing our third playtest of the Marvel Multiverse playtest tomorrow lunchtime for me, which is noon Mountain, and a bunch of other cool stuff. Nothing scheduled just yet, though. So that's all we got at the moment.
Mike, are you guys liking the Marvel RPG?
I'm sorry?
Are you guys liking the Marvel RPG?
I am liking it more than everybody else. It's a playtest. There are some things that just aren't there, like you can't play a psychic. Which is kind of a big deal.
For the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few powerful psychics there, and you can't play them. I think it's very slick. I think it's well put together. I trust the author. I've liked his previous work. A lot of the criticisms I've heard have been about where they charge him for a playtest, and maybe that's fair, maybe it's not. But I think it's a fun book. I'm enjoying it. There's a lot of room for improvement, but that's the point of a playtest, right? So.
We're doing our first playtest on Wednesday night.
Is this like the 5th Marvel system?
It might be.
I remember back in the day, I thought the original TSR. I thought TSR originally did a very good job.
That was a fun game, yeah.
Yeah, way back when.
Who's doing the new system?
It's in house, I think, with Marvel.
Oh, okay.
It's a crew of people that I know to varying degrees. I know Matt Forbeck is involved. Matt, who, depending on your point of view, either is to thank or to blame for my little game writing career, and some other folks I'm familiar with. But it's enough people who I'm familiar with the work that I thought it would be worth a look if you're into the dice and stuff.
What's the system? What's
Mike?
It's new, right? It's a new system.
It's a whole new system. It's called the 616 system, and
Okay.
we are at the top of an hour of a podcast, and
Like might, agility, reason, vitality.
yeah, it all spells Marvel. Yeah,
Yeah, it all spells Marvel.
the L is for love. I don't know, but there are a lot of reviews out there. They're good ones. We did a review about a month back of it. Like I say, I like what I've read. I've heard a lot of mixed opinions, but it's a play test. I think just to be fair, you have to acknowledge that it's still a work in progress. And
Like She-Hulk on Disney Plus.
I understand
well,
what
there's
you're
your
saying.
plug. You know?
There's your plug.
I'm in no way involved with the show. I think the character's kind of cool, but
All right. Well, we have been at this at about an hour, and so this is I want to just quickly say thank you to everybody that made the dream happen the first time. I will be eternally grateful to all the 237 mad, beautiful people that contributed to make Transgressive Horror happen. And I hope that you will check out the Kickstarter for Volume 2. It's like this one, only it'll have a 2. Subversive Sci-Fi. I just dropped the link to the Kickstarter in the chat again. You can go ahead and sign up to be notified for when we go live Friday, and you'll be able to see the full list of contributors and the full list of options we have for you to support this project. And in the meantime, if you want to spread that link around, we sure would appreciate it. We have to ask for a bit more money this time, so we hope that won't be a barrier. We hope we're growing our audience, and that enough people saw what we did on Volume 1 that you want to see us keep making these. And thank you in advance for all the support, and thank you all, gentlemen, for sharing your talents and your time and your patience and your indulgence and your wonderful gifts with me and my little dream of having a little publishing thing there to do great work. And you guys certainly do. And thank you for being here tonight.
thank you for having us.
Yep. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
And
Take care.
thank you all. And thank you all for tuning in. Take care. This has been the Go Show Podcast. Good night.
Good night.